we're covering kind of 3 different uses for the GlobalNOC automation tool. And Tom was going to start with the prefix list. Let me jump to VPN tunnels and we'll just go through mine. So Grover talked about some of this. He used this as one of his brief examples when he gave the kind of the overarching view of the automation tool. But for Indiana GigaPOP, one of our specific use cases is to automate VPN tunnel creation. And so we build VPN tunnels for different uses. And the reason why we chose this as kind of the perfect initial use case for the automation tool is that the configuration is fairly simple, it's concise, and it's infrequent, which may seem like a weird thing to automate, something that's infrequent, but Grover touched on a really good point in that this infrequency mixed with some tribal knowledge can make it hard when every new tunnel, when a need for a new tunnel comes up, because we don't do it a whole lot. Some people kind of know the process, others it's like less clear. So when we've put this in the automation tool, this gives us a way to kind of go about it the same way every time, and it requires less tribal knowledge to pull all the parts together. So it's simple, concise, and infrequent, and that makes it really good for us. So I believe Grover might have showed this, but essentially what we've got here is a UI that helps us kind of fill out the variables and then create the necessary config for any given VPN tunnel. And this is a previous tool that Tom actually had made, but it is kind of 100% self-contained, and it does not have any cool database magic or ServiceNow magic like the new automation tool does. So we went from kind of this homegrown automation UI to what we now have with the GlobalNOC automation tool. Let's see here, move along, which looks very similar in that we have a list of variables. There's some amount of autofill that takes place based on some of these variables are reading from the database, or they're looking at current config before you make your input. But what's not shown in this picture is the fact that are those kind of those ties to the database and to ServiceNow, and how I don't know, I guess it's just a lot better from what we had homegrown to now being able to kind of tie into the database. And there's just so much more power that we haven't quite tapped into totally, but it's there and we'll soon get to it. So let's see. That is our tunnel automation. We also are doing our third use case for the automation tool is this autoconf diff. And let me explain what that is. I think Grover touched on it, but basically what the automation tool, one big concept of the automation tool is this intent versus truth discussion. And that is, if we start with truth, the truth of the network is what's currently configured on each of the devices. The intent of the network is maybe what we've applied in the form of templates and like what we plan to put into the network at any given time. So the automation tool allows us to kind of write up an intent and kind of plan on when that's going to be applied into the network. And then once that's applied in the network, it becomes kind of the truth of the network. And so one aspect of the automation tool allows us to look at either the templates we've written and or the config that's in the field, and we can see at any given time the difference between the two. So what that means for us in the iLight context here is that, the network's obviously running. Hopefully it's running problem-free. But then let's say someone goes in and makes a template change. Well, periodically what this autoconf diff tool will do is it will look at the templates and the intent, compare it to the network truth, and then if there's a difference there, it will send us a notice in the form of an alert mon alert. And that's how we get the NOC engaged, and that's how we get engineering engaged to either go apply that new config or, you know, fix a problem where config was changed without us knowing or changed in a way we didn't want. So this AutoComp diff tool really keeps us kind of honest, and it keeps the network and the intent where they need to be as we move towards new configs and as the network changes and improves. So I'm going to show you an example of what this looks like. iLight's a Juniper shop, and this may be familiar for you Juniper users out there, that when you do, you can start to apply a new config, and before you commit, you can do a show compare where you see how your new changes are going to kind of fit into the context of the current config. That's what this tool does for us when it compares the templates with what the network truth is. And then when it sends an alert to AlertMon, we get to see something like this saying that, well, hey, if we were to deploy the automation tool right now, it would remove these lines, meaning that the truth in the network has this config that the intent doesn't want to be there. Or vice versa, if we get an alert from this diff tool that shows a green plus, it's basically telling us that someone has made a template change. The intent is that we're going to add config if you apply this to the truth in the network. And so based on these periodic like diffs from this tool, engineering gets alerted that, hey, we need to either update the template or we need to update the routers so that these are back in sync. Or maybe we need to schedule a change for, you know, later in the week to apply new configs that someone has put into the intent tool, you know, for later deployment. So let's take a look at kind of that process again, just real quickly, on how this works for us. So in the context of the iLight network, a change may occur in the form of a template or an active config change on the routers. The GlobalNOC automation tool will run a diff against our intended config in the templates and what's actually out there. And if a change is discovered, it'll be noted. It'll be sent into the NOC via an AlertMon alert, and then engineering will be engaged to either fix something that wasn't intended to happen or plan a change to deploy new configs or what have you. So those are two ways we're using the automation tool for GigaPOP's VPN tunnels and for this kind of intent versus truth periodic comparison to kind of keep us honest with network config. So Tom, is he online? I heard a Slack. Okay.
Yeah.
Was that you, Tom? I heard something. Tom, you there? Still not hearing Tom.
Looks like he just muted himself.
Can you hear me?
Gotcha. Yep. Keep talking. Nope, you're not consistently coming through. Let's see, how much time do I have? I've got
About 5 minutes left.
5 minutes. Okay. Well, real quick, is there any questions about the VPN tunnels or the kind of the AutoComp diff while I'm here? Hopefully it was understandable. I jumped into it before I was, had to kind of go there quickly, but hopefully I got the point across.
How much of your work would you say is automated at this point?
That's a good question, Corey. I would say not as much as we would like, but honestly, this autoconf diff tool, I think, is a strong encouragement to keep us in the automation tool. Anytime we make a network change, by habit, we go straight to the routers and make a change. Well, now that we've got this tool running, it's kind of showing us and pointing out like, hey, you should be using the automation tool, and here's the diff that you've created by going straight to the router. So I think with time, this is encouraging us to do more, originate all of our work more from the automation tool, which I think will support, the GlobalNOCs and iLight's kind of goal of, automating up to 80% of what we're doing. So this is a really good way to get us in that direction.
How much of your config do you think is actually in the automation tool? Is the whole thing there, or is it just pieces?
So the vast majority of the config for iLight, that is the core routers of iLight, is in the automation tool. And at this point, that's like kind of the easiest config that doesn't change them as much or isn't as variable when it comes to like member specific configs. The next step for us will be automating more of the interfaces and the policies and BGP and things like that will require a little more programmatic templating to kind of flex and change for specific member needs. So, but I would say the vast majority of, I can't tell you how many lines of config, but the vast majority is already there. It's just that's the less complex of the config. So, Tom, are you there on your phone? Can't hear you, Tom. I can try to talk about the prefixes.
Yeah, it doesn't show his mic as being, it doesn't even show him having a mic, so I think he's still trying to get that connected.
Okay, let me just try to scroll back through here. If you didn't think I did well on the previous slides, this is going to be harder for me because this is Tom's bread and butter. But Tom, let me give you one more second. Are you there? Save me from butchering your part.
Yeah, he says that he's tried to dial in and it still isn't working for him.
Okay.
He's been through 3 different devices now at this point.
Okay.
I see he's connected to audio now. Tom, are you there?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Well, I wonder how long you can hear me.
So far, so good.
I don't know, I can hear you well now.
I think we spoke too soon.
Oh no. Tom?
Clearly.
Looks like it's all you, Ryan.
All right, here we go. So when it comes to prefixes, I hinted on the fact that we need to move towards more complex bits of our config. This is one part. Actually, we kind of started with this. So we got our feet wet with the complexity of like programmatic templating in terms of the automation tool. And this might not be the direction Tom meant to take with this, but one really powerful piece of this GlobalNOC automation tool is the fact that it can be database driven. And so when we think of like, in terms of iLight, when we apply new config for the network, or when we turn up new members or new services for members, often we would just go straight to the routers, we'd configure the router, and then the database would be after the fact. The database, we would then update the database to reflect what we've just done for a given member. Well, what's really cool, and I think the direction we're going to go with this automation tool, is it kind of flips that order of operations. And the prefixes here is one way that that's flipped, in that we can start in the database. Somebody needs a new prefix added, somebody needs something new turned up. We start with the database. We log into like the member service as it's shown in the database, and we add a prefix to that member service. Well, the automation tool has some templating already in place that will go and read from the database. It will find that the member has a new prefix, and then it will build itself. It will build that config based on its programmatic templating. And then the next time we go to deploy the automation tool, that new prefix is ready for deployment, and that customer is effectively turned up. So this, I think, is like really the cool and the powerful automation, possibility with this new tool. And we're currently doing it with member prefixes. And so, you know, some amount of that, once that happens, I'm not sure that it's totally automated to update the registered owner and Aaron and all that sort of stuff. But we do have the ability to do database driven automation with these prefixes. And that is kind of the main point, I think, of this section. So Tom, chime in if you're connected. You know, hopefully we'll get some good tidbits from you if you got things to add. But I think I'm running out of time, and I think that was kind of the main thing. And so if I were to recap, you know, kind of what iLight and GigaPOP is doing here, you know, we're using the automation tool to do database-driven automation. I think that's the direction everyone wants to go eventually. But then we're using some of its current capabilities, some of its, I would say, less complex maybe capabilities, more user friendly capabilities to do the VPN tunnels with the intent tool, and also kind of the network config monitoring with autoconf diff. And it's been great. I think it's really changing the way we're looking at the network and the direction we're going with how we deliver configuration and deliver services. So thanks for listening. Let me get to the last slide. Where are we at? Oop, there we are.
Love it.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan and Tom.